Hello, I'm Dr. Katherine Horton. This is a very short video explaining, to the best of my knowledge, what microwave weapons are, or what electromagnetic weapons are. There are many, many different types of microwave and electromagnetic weapons, but once you have understood it, what it is in its core, you will be not surprised about the report of victims and what they say in detail. And once you know how these weapons work, you will recognize, from the details, from the, what's it called, circumstantial evidence that you can pull out of victim reports, you can conclude what the most likely weapon is that they has been used on them. So the first thing you have to know is that microwaves, if the intensity is high enough, pass through brick and concrete. Okay, so if you have a very, very powerful microwave beam, and you just, say laser, say let's take a military grade, focused microwave beam, then that can pass through, as I understand it, the walls of a house. Okay, and then, as I understand it, and I'm taking most of my knowledge from the information that Dr. Reinhard Munzert has collected together and some other sources, but I consider him to be a reliable source. The other documents I've seen also seem reliable. If you're an expert in the field and you think I'm, saying something wrong, please put your comments down below and correct me, okay? But as I understand it, and as I have certainly experienced, there seem to be certain beams that pass through wall, okay? And this is just a fact. So if you just have enough power, it can pass through. So for example, your microwave, so one thing that these electromagnetic waves cannot pass through is metal. And for example, your microwave, okay, is safe as long as it's well shielded, okay. Now you can buy certain measuring devices. It's called, I think, microwave leak detectors. And should you be scared about your microwave? Should it be second-hand, or you're just worried? You don't have to live your life in panic. You can just buy a microwave leak detector and see if it leaks anywhere. If it leaks, it means that the shielding isn't matched up and there are small gaps and the radiation comes out. Basically, it's just radiating out through that gap. Okay, but you don't have to panic, because if the shielding is good, and it should be in most microwaves these days because they pass safety tests, and it's actually very easy, then you're perfectly safe, close to your microwave. And that is because the inside of the microwave is essentially entirely shielded in metal. So the sides of the microwave without the window, that's metal, that's clear. And unless there are any gaps, or unless it has been damaged, you dropped your microwave or something like that, it should be just safe. Okay. Now, what you have to also know is that the front window, if you look at it, actually has this meshing. There seems to be this dark meshing. And that's metal. And that's the metal that keeps you safe when you're looking at your food, looking through the window of your microwave. Because the size of the meshing is matched to the wavelength of the microwaves inside, and basically that meshing absorbs the microwave, so you're safe. It doesn't have to be a sheet of metal. It depends on the wavelength. So the gaps, that you can actually look through and see your food, are matched to the wavelength, so that the radiation gets absorbed, but the visible light that allows you to see the food passes through. Do you see? And that's because visible light and light, because microwaves are electromagnetic waves, the same thing. So microwaves and visible light and X-rays and radio are all electromagnetic waves. All. The only difference is the frequency. So when you've got a very, very, a frequency that's very, very fast, it means that the electromagnetic beam has got very high energy. When it's like this, it's lower energy. Okay, so that's the energy of a photon of one light particle depends on its frequency. Okay, but then of course the overall intensity depends on how many light particles you have. Okay, so you can be so you can have overall an energy deposited depending on what you do, depending on how many photons you're sending. So it's not that simple. You have to take the total integral. But overall, when you're talking about one electromagnetic wave, then you have, you know, a very, sorry, here, the camera starts here in space. So, you know, this is low energy, and if it's oscillating like that, it's high energy. But the frequency or the wavelengths will also determine what sort of shielding you will need to block out this thing, you know, when you're just talking about individual photons. So anyway, this is roughly to explain why you can see your food inside the microwave and yet be safe. If microwaves were exactly the microwaves that make your food really hot were the same as visible light, then you couldn't look at your food at the same time as cooking it, you know. But fortunately it's not like that, which is why it's so handy. We can actually see, you know, how slowly whatever an ice cream is melting inside, or, you know, whatever your food gets cooked and then starts to be charcoal. So this is to understand. But what you have to know is that metal, sheet metal, you know, unless we're talking now literally gamma rays that punch through, you know, whatever, can block out, you know, all the frequencies. But when you've got gaps, then the size of the gaps or the holes will determine what sort of frequencies they block out and which not. Okay. So this is now really 101. Okay, 101. So this is for metal. But when you've got other materials, it very much depends on the details, you know. It really depends on the details. And you can already tell that in your microwave, because sometimes you've got certain containers and they do not get hot, but the food gets hot. And that's because the actual, you know, the plate or whatever structure you might, you know, put your food in will not absorb the microwaves at the same rate. Do you see? So that's why your food gets hot, but not necessarily the container that you placed in. If it were the other way around, it would be really bad, because then your container might melt and your food might melt, or your container melts and your food is not even warm, you know. So there are all these differences, but the microwaves are essentially tuned towards heating water. So then that's why if you just put in your, say, a steak or something like food, like, I don't know, let's say a whatever, you know, like a steak with some vegetables or something like that. Both the steak and the vegetables contain water, but it takes some time to heat it up because it's very, very dense. However, if you then put you know, a hot chocolate in, a mug of hot chocolate, and you turn it on and you're making it, you're keeping it in the microwave at the same power as a steak, this thing is, I mean, happens to me regularly because I'm a bit scatterbrained. So then, you know, I'm just cooking this thing and it's just flowing over and bubbling up and it's making a mess in the microwave. Happens to me over and over because, you know, out of habit, I just turn up the microwave as if it was solid food, and then I go away and forget about it. And by the time I come back, I've got a puddle inside my microwave because this thing bubbled over. And that's the difference, because hot chocolate is, you know, inside you've got milk and mostly water, and you're mostly, you know, that absorbs the heat very, very rapidly. Okay, so you understand this concept. You have met this concept before, that certain materials absorb electromagnetic waves differently, you know. So for example, another example, if you know how, if you have a conservatory, a glass house, you know, conservatory, you can spend all your time you like in your conservatory sunbathing, but you're not going to turn, you know, you're not going to develop a tan. And that's because ultraviolet gets absorbed by glass, but visible light and infrared is not. So that's why if the sun is shining, or, you know, a cloud passes and suddenly the sun is shining through your conservatory, you suddenly feel really, really warm. And you're essentially in a glass house, you know, it's like there, you know, the heat gets absorbed and contained, and you really have this effect that you know, the heat is nicely coming in and, you know, gets trapped in there. But ultraviolet is not. So you have to go outside to develop a tan, because you develop a tan when ultraviolet penetrates your skin and stimulates the pigmentation. So this, I'm not telling you anything crazy here, that certain materials absorb certain frequencies and not others. So certain frequencies pass through and others do not. And it very much depends on the intensity and the frequency. And it seems to be the case with these microwave weapons that you can essentially irradiate somebody through the walls of their home. What is a given is that you can irradiate people through the windows, that goes without saying, because I can even take a laser pointer. I had a laser pointer here, and shine the laser pointer through, and just, keep bothering you with a laser pointer through the window. That's totally clear. And the only thing you have to understand is that now there are certain waves that you can essentially shoot through the walls as well, So once you understand that concept, then you can think, hang on, can someone turn that into a weapon and actually shoot it in somebody? And it's a weapon if it passes through brick, it's not going to pass through, 5 meters of concrete, no. But most house walls are not that thick, actually. So if you have got one brick, can you shoot something through, such that it passes through the wall but causes damage inside a human being? And it seemed the answer seems to be yes. I didn't know about this before, right? But the answer seems to be yes, and it's these focused microwave beams. Again, if you can, prove me wrong, please inform me. But this is, I think, what what's now being discovered, that you can actually do that. So if people talk about microwave weapons and they say, oh, we're being shot at in our own home, then it's probably something like that. And a lot of victims notice that putting like a metal sheet or aluminium on your window really helps. And that's because if someone wants to shoot these weapons into you, if they shoot through the window, they will prefer shooting at you through the window, because then 100% of these microwaves pass through. If they have to shoot at you through a wall, they need, I think, more power or something like that. So, you really have to then use military kit. But it seems to be the case that you can shoot at people even through walls, I think. But that aside, you can most certainly shoot at them through the window. And microwaves, as you can imagine, by just looking at your own little microwave, cause pain inside the human body. Okay, so imagine someone takes the diffuse radiation inside your microwave, where it's just bouncing back and forth, and the metal actually reflects it back, so it's the entire cavity is being filled with microwaves and is heating your food. But imagine the transmitter, or the emitter. It's actually quite small. If you strip away the cladding from your microwave, you've got the actual thing that generates the microwaves is very, very small. Now imagine you turn that into a focused beam. And I think that one of the private investigators made a photograph of an actual modified home microwave that has been turned into a weapon. And what you see is a funnel at the front, So the actual funnel is guiding the microwave, so the microwaves will be bouncing off and essentially being emitted in a cone. And if you hold that up against a wall, I think you can really hurt somebody on the other side, because the microwaves are going to pass through the brick, or if it's just plasterboard, will go straight through. So this is it. This is what we're talking about. You have these microwaves. You know that your microwave is very cheap. And I'm telling you that already your microwave at home can be turned into a lethal weapon if you focus these beams. Do not do that, because by trying it out, you're very likely going to reflect beams back at you and kill yourself or cause yourself cancer. But just this concept, right? You can check it at home what happens to organic matter, by just putting a sausage into the microwave and turning it on. First of all, it's going to heat, then it's going to burst as the water inside is cooking and is expanding, and the steam is expanding, so it's going to burst the sausage. And if you keep heating it, eventually it will start, burning and charcoaling. So all these things you can use by firing microwaves at human beings. So when victims say people cause us pain with these electromagnetic guns, you have to think, okay, someone has taken a little transmitter from a microwave, from a $20, £20, €20 microwave, has focused it. If you just put a funnel around it, you already have, a metal funnel. You already have essentially a microwave, weapon. And they have focused this beam, and you can focus the beam to be the size of your head, or you can focus it down to a pencil beam. And then when you shoot it at a human being, you can cause exactly this that you caused in a sausage. So heating, heating on the skin, but from the sausage you also know that sometimes it's, you know, heated inside as well. When you use focused beams, or especially overcross beams in the focal point or the overcross, that's where all the energy is going to go. So there are ways to cause a lot of heat inside and none on the outside. So there are ways to cook a human being on the inside, cause organ damage, tissue damage, heart attacks, make their heart explode, horror, absolute horrors, and the skin will be intact. Okay, so this is it. This is microwaves. These are the microwave weapons 101. All you had to understand is a certain frequency will be absorbed by certain materials and not others. So something can pass through a material, through like glass, but be absorbed in the human body and cause pain. So if you take a Pyrex dish or a glass dish and you put it in the microwave and you put a soup inside, the soup will get warm, but not the Pyrex, or not that much, because eventually it absorbs heat. But first of all, it will be the water. Now, human beings are 80% water. Most of our cells are made up of water. So microwaves as a weapon are massively destructive to us, right? Because they will heat us. They will cause tissue damage as the cells, pop, and all this stuff. Do you understand? This is why microwave weapons are a nightmare, the biggest nightmare ever, because they are cheap. And for sure, they can cause damage inside a human being. They can cause any sort of damage. Do you see? Just like in your sausage, you can charcoal, you can just heat, you can make it, rip apart. Yeah, well, welcome. You are, you've just done your first microwave weapon trial in your own microwave. Okay? And that's what we're talking about. And then I want to talk about the really big guns. So you've got something that you can Google. It's called the active denial system. I mean, whoever came up with this messed up title. I mean, it's so Orwellian, but never mind. It's essentially these really big things. Like, it looks like a ginormous dish, and now the army, and it looks like a big flat plate essentially onside these ginormous pickup trucks and tanks and everything. It's called the active denial system, the ADS system. And I think I should put it on my website, but there's this cutesy demonstration video by just it happens to be the US Army. Again, I'm not against the US Army. That was just, very popular, that video, so I found it first on Google. But the same thing will be done by the German military, by the UK military, by any military in the world, wherever you are, okay? So I'm never against one particular, but the US will be hit hardest because they're advertising materials everywhere, so I pick it up. So anyway, so that happens to be an advertising video from the US Army, and it's very cutesy, and you've got these like really nice chaps explaining very well how it works. But the one thing they don't tell you, they have this like big ginormous thing, and then they show you it's used for crowd control. And then they say, oh, we can emit this beam and it will just cause pain. And suddenly, even these really rough guys, even like soldiers and even like specially trained soldiers, just feels pain on their skin that they cannot bear, and literally just drop their gun and they just want to be out of the beam, And you can aim this thing at crowds, and they're all going to disperse because they feel unbearable pain. And these people say, oh yes, but this is just penetrates your skin, and then you feel pain, and that's it, and it's okay. What they don't tell you is, I think this is bullshit. It's going to also penetrate deeper. There will be radiation. So yeah, for sure you're going to set off the nerves, but you're also going to get a dosage of radiation that's going to penetrate your inner dermis to a certain fraction. Number one, actually I think this is really, really bad for you. Okay, it's not just, ooh, you felt pain and now the protest is dispersed and, job done. No, I think you also radiated these people with something that's potentially carcinogenic. Okay, so that aside, right, I think this is just bullshit pitch. But yeah, it does cause pain, and it's highly effective because, yeah, causing people pain is highly effective. But the fact that, hang on, protesting isn't that part of our democratic right? So causing people pain just because they dare to protest, isn't that like doing something criminal when other people use their democratic right? Okay. Some lawyers should get on the case of the active denial system here, used as crowd control, because I think this is just not on. But let's say you have actually violent people and you want to just stop the violence. Okay, but yeah, okay, you know what I mean. So big ethical questions and criminal law questions here. But that aside, what they do not tell you is that, these special SAS Navy SEAL guys will go, ooh, when the power is really low. It's like when you take your microwave and you can charcoal sausages and steaks, but now you turn it down to defrost your deep frozen birthday cake for your kids, right? Then you turn down the power and then you can slowly defrost a cream cake. But what they do not tell you, that when these, Navy SEALs go, ow, that's when the power is really, really down. Because when you turn the power just a little bit up, these people's bodies should just pop. Because the power of this ginormous dish is such, and is focused into such a small beam, that it's essentially a super microwave. So you can make their little hearts pop, for sure. You can literally make their eyes pop, for sure, within a second. Okay? You can burn their bodies. You can, in this focused microwave beam, you can paralyze them, turn up the power, and ignite the fat in their body so that it burns up by itself. Or you turn this up, they faint, they stay in the beam, and then they can be charcoaled in a very short time. They can go up in flames. And I'm telling you that as a physicist, I look at this thing, and this is a super microwave. So anything your microwave can do, this thing can do, like with extra oomph. Yeah? So when you see these things, and you saw these like little cutesy adverts by these handsome young chaps, and it's going like, hey, yeah, that's so cool, like that's like the best thing, you should think, holy fuck. Because this is an incineration device. This is a human incineration device. And when these things are being rolled into city centers, you're essentially relying on potentially little psychopaths being at the dial, and just like on your microwave, if the charcoaling of the sausage and defrosting your cream cake is literally just a wrist turn, like that. You just turn up the dial. And it will be the same thing with that super microwave as well. Do you trust those dudes in there not to by accident, turn their wrist too high up when you're in a protest? Because I frickin' don't. I mean, I've seen what they've done in Iraq and in Afghanistan and Syria and everywhere, and I wouldn't trust these chaps with, I don't know what, with a kiddie toy. Because they're freaking trained killers, right? I mean, that's what soldiers are. They're trained killers. We send them in somewhere so that they murder people. Do I trust them not to flip? Not to have PTSD and just think they're in a war zone when they're actually just driving these super microwaves down the local mall? I don't. So when you see the active denial system, think, what? Yeah, active denial. Well, the one thing these people should not be able to deny is that they can do the same thing as your little microwave. Okay, this military kit can do the same thing as your little microwave. Do you understand? So if your little microwave can charcoal a steak, then that big thing can charcoal you and the entire group you're in. Do you understand? This is physics 101, that you can check yourself with your own microwave, and do not put live animals into your microwave to test this, because you know what the outcome is. You do not need live animals, to put in your microwave. Don't be a sick, psychopathic bastard. Just put a sausage in and it will be the same effect. Okay, because it's the same organic matter. And just watch, just try it out. Have, buy steak for $10. Have your own experiments to understand the active denial system. And, think about it. And then Google electromagnetic weapons or microwave weapons used in Iraq. And just see what Google returns. Should you come across, say, certain Iraqi doctors' testimony who say, yeah, there was this fighting and we were called out and we expected, to recover bodies, or the dead people, but all we found was essentially just people who didn't even look like, or human remains that even looked like corpses. They looked just like leather and heaps of bones, like literally, like we've never seen something like that before. Does that remind you of a certain setting on your microwave when it's not high enough to charcoal your steak? It just slowly evaporates the water from your steak and then it turns like leather. Would you recognize something like that from the report of these Iraqi doctors? Would that remind you of that maybe? When you just like get all the water out and all that remains is actually the tissue, like the hard or harder material that actually makes up a steak. Okay, so then you can either go, oh, these Iraqi doctors, I mean, they must have been on drugs and I don't know what they think about, what they're talking about. Or you say, hang on, does that sound like an active denial system having been used on a bunch of Iraqi civilians? Like a microwave dish like that, because it could sound like that to you once you've finished, the little experimental test run with your own microwave at home, And then when these Iraqi doctors also say, we went also to another scene and there wasn't even like these desiccated things that looked like human skin and bones anymore. It was just literally charcoaled things with some bones, but the rest was just charcoaled. Will you recognize that from your own microwave? Or will you maybe conclude that, oh, it sounds like an active denial system has been actively used in Iraq and then been denied, So this is now what we're talking about. And when you see these like cutesy adverts with the Navy SEALs or whoever these people are, or maybe it's Army, I have no idea, then you think, oh, is it really that cutesy? Is it really that good an idea to have a bunch of trained killers, roll these things into our city centers just to dispel a bunch of animal rights protesters, just not dispel, disperse, Is that a good idea? Or should we think, holy fuck, has one of these people maybe again lost their mind, high up somewhere, so much about microwave weapons. But as I said, they can do all sorts of stuff. They can, make your eyes pop. They can make your brain pop. They can cook your brain inside. They can give you a heart attack. They can actually make your heart explode. They can make your organs explode. They can cook your organs. They can burn your skin, but they can also damage you inside without burning the skin. And they can do this through a window when a beam like that is pointed at you. Or they can also do the same thing when your window has been sealed off with metal and it's punched through a wall. But then I would say that probably what you're then dealing with is military equipment. And I'm saying that I think there's military equipment that can then punch through walls. So when people who are already complaining about being stalked say we're also being irradiated, you would have to think organized stalking sounds like, some sort of sounds like our intelligence agencies. Would they also have good connections to the arm industry and, get hold of these weapons? Yeah, the answer is yes, yeah. So then you can think, hang on a second, when someone complains about these odd symptoms, then you probably, would conclude, can conclude, should conclude that microwave weapons have been used on them. Okay? So this is how to understand the testimony of victims. There we go. Enough for now.